I'll play the Seinfeld clip, but you got to understand, folks, the people running this, you notice at every university now, it's basically the same. This didn't just magically happen. The Atlantic says, how did it get this way? Why do they have panic attacks if you have a brown paper bag? You know, why do they see racism in the clouds? It was scientifically done. Now, I'm going to shut up, and he's got a lot of points he wants to go over. He's got an initiative that he's going to call for today. You know, Jan Napolitano heads up a bunch of universities. How about she resigns? So we're going to talk about using their own weapons against them. We have the White House praising the protest. Again, this is about global social engineers taking everything over with one standardized culture that is a plastic corporate culture that can be rewritten within a week. And then you're given the new received proper terms. People ask why they're always changing, why it's always getting more extreme, because it's scientific. We're being culturally conquered. Not that the old mix of culture was perfect, but at least it was cultures. This is scientific. I'm going to shut up now and go to the professor, trineday.com. You can find his book and work there. Darrell is taught at the University of California, Davis, for most of his academic career. He holds undergraduate and graduate degrees in political science, popular culture studies, and comparative culture. Hamamoto is the senior ranking professor in the Department of Asian American Studies. He is a recognized authority on U.S. media, popular culture, and sexuality, having published extensively in these areas. Hamamoto is a recipient of the Rockefeller Foundation Research Fellowship at UCLA and is a Fulbright scholar. His current project is a volume that outlines the principles of the New World Order theory. He teaches a class on this and is directed to the current generation of college and university undergraduates in search of alternatives to the dominant foundation-guided corporatist curriculum. Now, that said, that's a mouthful, but that's what this is. And you got me from the outside telling you what I see. He can tell you from the inside. Good to have you back, my friend. I just played some of those clips. Is it cresting or is it just starting? Is this the beginning of the Maoist-style Red Terror or the Soviet or jackbooted brown shirt Nazi bizarreness? I mean, this is crazy.
It's good to be back, Alex. Good to be back with you and your audience. You know, my perceptions and yours square up almost identically. And I refer to this process as weaponizing the student body. There's a twofold meaning in that. One is that the students are being used as a tool or a weapon against discussion, against dissent, against dissenters, against unpopular, or actually I'm a very popular professor, but they're used as a weapon against professors such as myself who don't go along with the politically correct orthodoxy. And the second meaning of weaponization is that these creatures that we're seeing on these YouTube postings, their bodies have been weaponized. You've talked many times about the sodium fluoride. That's only part of it. According to an environmental scientist by the name of Lauren Murray, these undergraduates are being hit with heavy, concerted, programmed doses of EMF. They're being heavily controlled by social media in general.
That's right. Screen time on record reprograms and brain damages.
It does. In addition to that, we have been subjected to, involuntarily, we've been subjected to experiments such as this famous social contagion experiment that was launched by Facebook. And their team of behavioral and social scientists wrote a paper on it, a social science paper, an academic paper, and they were completely unapologetic about it. So this is like you're saying, it is a program. It's the students are in an electropharmaceutical gulag, and it's no accident that whatever campus you go to, it's the same program, it's the same scenario. You have these subsets of what you could call the crisis actor that we saw rolled out in Sandy Hook, and now they've been deployed.
Sure, you've got the
populations.
You've got the Soros-connected railroad head who's got his son out there triggering and running the whole op. Exactly. So they got just a few of their operatives. They're then given media attention. They're then the victim, and then they then lead the sheep to slaughter.
That's right. These are Judas goats, they're the alpha goats. And as you pointed out earlier, there's a certain subset within that, and they're typically aligned with some sort of GLBTQIA agenda, or they come out of gender and sexuality studies. By the way, they don't even call it women's studies anymore, because part of this is gender is to take us into a post-gender world, a transhumanist, post-human world.
That's right. They're not freeing us sexually, and you're an expert on this. They are ending our sexual power.
That's right. They're going to take us to the next level, as it said, and that's the level where there is no gender differentiation. So you see this woman, Melissa Click, who thankfully resigned. She's a crisis actor. It's going to be interesting to see if one of your listeners want to track her to see where she shows up, but I'm sure she has a job waiting for her someplace in the university system. But it's typically a female, quote-unquote, white assistant professor.
This is what you said here 2 years ago. I mean, you've laid this out. Yes. It's a program.
Oh, yes. I've had a ringside seat in this neo-Maoist Pol Pot-style Red Guards program that's being run out of academic affairs. And I want to point that out.
By the way, folks, I just got chills.
Yes.
He's not just saying that. He went through the Rockefeller program. This is what they did with the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, and it's what they did in China. I mean,
That's right.
It's crazy to see that our government would do this because we know what the next phases are.
And U.S. intelligence was behind the auto-genocide in Cambodia. And by the way, I teach the children and grandchildren of refugees from these totalitarian regimes. And that's why they're somewhat resistant to the political correctness that they are being indoctrinated to at the University of California, University of Missouri.
I guess it kind of wakes you up to have your family killed.
It does. So they're at the tipping point, so to speak. They're trying to recruit them aggressively through these mind control regimens, again, through the Office of Student Affairs and so-called student community centers, where they go to these little enclaves and reopen their hurts, their little problems with mommy and daddy, and they take them to these isolated retreats, and then they find people there who can take the program a little bit further. And then if you're really, really sleazy, you get to stay behind to attend the after party. And then perhaps after that, maybe you get to party with Janet Napolitano at one of these mansion parties. Who knows?
It's a cult.
It's a cult. It's a mind control cult. It comes right out of the pages of Jonestown, which again apparently was a U.S. intelligence operation.
Declassified. When it got exposed, they shut it down and had everybody kill themselves.
Absolutely. And several people, including Congressman Leo Ryan, sacrificed their lives in order to expose this dark aspect of our national security university state.
Well, when we put this interview out and write articles about it tomorrow, and it's not rhetoric. I say that neurotically because it's true. University professor exposes government mind control programs on universities, and that's what it is. It's so bold that they would, and please keep getting into the facts and the techniques of how they do it, but it really is bold they'd try this here, and I guess it's working like a charm, except you're fighting back and many others are now fighting back. It may backfire on them. Please keep elaborating.
Well, any number of professors, my colleagues, even at UCdavis, are beginning to man up on this issue. Sorry for using the sexist language. I got in trouble for talking to a provost and using that.
No, I understand. We need to do that, not because we're trying to, just showing how everything's programmed. Please continue.
I'm doing it as a deliberate provocative gesture just to antagonize these rats who are spying on me right now. But, yeah, these, well, first of all, let me establish, I've done some research on Chancellor Linda Katehi, who, by the way, is deducting 25% of my salary for the next 5 months. And I call here and now for her immediate resignation as Chancellor of the University of California, Davis, because she is engaged in actions that go counter to the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, and to the very principles of academic freedom. So Linda Katehi, stand down. And while you're at it, please take the president of the UC system, Janet Napolitano, with you, and Dean Susan Kaiser, who has stationed a emeritus professor in my classes, both of them. He's attending every single one of my lectures and taking copious notes so that he can pass it to the commissars. So why don't you three resign, leave us alone. We're going to rebuild the University of California without you. The people of the state of California, the American people, will prevail on this issue.
And by the way, I've read about you in student writings and other things. You've got some of the most attended classes. You head up the department. They tried to get rid of you. you're promoting true classical liberalism, and the young men and women love it. Because, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but explain to people how successful you've been, because you're Toto pulling back the curtain, showing the man behind the curtain or the women behind the curtain that are literally engaged in cultural mind control. Because they know these young people aren't going to be able to get jobs now in this economy. They got to screw them up mentally, so they're addled and in a cult and don't know why they have no future. So, I mean, this is really a sabotage of the American mind and a balkanization. But specifically, talk about how popular you are. That's why they're trying to get rid of you.
Well, in all modesty, I was teaching introductory classes of 200 students, and my classes were routinely oversubscribed. And the university is so sleazy, they put one of these controllers into the departmental chair of my department, and he hired somebody specifically, and then she hired 4 student snitches, assistants, to empty out my classes. And she went on social media, Twitter, Facebook, in order to do so. Now, eventually, she got thrown under the bus, and that's a warning to all you snitches out there who think you're going to get over by screwing with people, whether it's me or someone else. But eventually, they're going to roll over on you. So keep that in mind before you attend one of these bogus encampments, these so-called safe spaces, or before you turn your soul over to so-called the Student Community Center. But she got rolled over, and as a result, this new academic year, I'm Mr. Popular again. My classes are already for the next quarter already are oversubscribed unless they pull some dirty tricks on me. So yes, I am the senior ranking professor. Given
well, they're definitely scared of you, and that's the point. Is you've been through several years of persecution for teaching a class, really giving young people true value on how the education system has been taken over. This is invaluable.
That's right, and they understand it, Alex. These are really super bright, highly motivated young men and women, and that is why I am so thoroughly invested in their future, because their future is our future. And I am not submitting to this notion that America and the American economy is dead or dying. In fact, my new area of emphasis is building up the new Silk Road economy, as it's called.
Well, I agree with you. We could turn the economy back on at any time. They're trying to go into this post-industrial shutdown mode, trying to get them ready for it. That's why doing what you're doing will help create a new renaissance, and more professors are doing it. Let's get more into the technicals, though, because you've been to the Rockefeller program. I mean, this is a real operation. How do they take these young people and get them where they're just hysterical in fear, like Freddy Krueger's coming to get them when they hear there might be, you're not banning the people from wearing costumes, and then they shriek and scream and, act like someone just murdered their baby. This is true mind control. When you look at these people, they're wild-eyed, they're scared. What have they done to these people?
Well, first of all, they have to hire a ethnically correct leader, a vice chancellor to head the student affairs unit, and that covers everything from athletics to food service to the so-called student community center. And she, and I say she because it's typically a woman these days, has to be a minority, Latina, or Asian American or African American. So she's there, she's in place, and then she staffs the entire operation with people who are sympathetic to the agenda. And the agenda, by the way, comes from the Pentagon, it comes from the Department of Defense. It doesn't come from the University of California. It definitely doesn't come from the professors. And we have a principle of shared governance, which has completely been discarded. So they have that. And at the ground level, they have, at the Student Community Center, we have a brand new building on our campus here at UCdavis. And what they did is they threw all the true student activists out of the operation. And they put these people who are maybe in their late 20s, early 30s, who always wanted to be popular when they were undergraduates.
Apparatchiks.
And they have apparatchiks, correct. And they have a master's degree, it's just a graduate degree to administer the 18 and 19-year-olds who are looking for legitimately a social cause. They want a better society.
So they role model them. They put them in. Just like if you want to corrupt an 18-year-old woman to make her a prostitute, you put her in with a 20-year-old who guides her into it. They just get them ready to pimp them directly in. Stay there. This is inside intel, folks. Key info. A whistleblower. By the way, the University of Missouri, Fox News is now reporting, has appointed a new black interim president. And I could care less if you got a black football coach or black president as long as they do a good job. But this is clearly, you must resign and admit you're racist, and we're giving your job because you're white. I mean, it's terrorism. And it just shows what they can do. And this is, again, federally globalist directed, where they can make the universities all capitulate and do whatever they want. Because after they remove 20 or 30 university presidents and chancellors, they're going to say now, you will adopt 100% our program. You will now carry it out. Report, U of Missouri names black interim president, USA Today. The governing board of the University of Missouri has selected a black law professor and deputy chancellor emeritus to serve as interim president of the university system. Multiple media outlets were reporting Thursday. It'll only get worse now because it never stops. Michael Middleton retired in August after 30 years at the school. His selection comes 3 days after Tim Wolfe resigned amid controversy over his handling of a series of racially charged events. And they're now calling it Yale a racially charged event because people freaked out and said ban costume parties. Get rid of it, how dare you? Shut up, get rid of it. I mean, it's just crazy. But it's not when you realize it's weaponized, it's by design. Professor Darrell Hamamoto is our guest. And he heads up he's the senior ranking professor in the Department of Asian American Studies. And he's began to see this years ago and has now been writing about it and exposing it extensively. Before we go back to him, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot fund this operation without your support. And you've been doing that, so you've seen us expand, hire more reporters, send our reporters around the country and the world, break more news, have a bigger effect. But I believe in the free market. I know you're such great listeners that you'd buy products even if they weren't the very best. But I want you to be a repeat customer, plus I want the good, karma, whatever you want to call it. We bring you really true game changers. I could have 100 products out right now, go to a major manufacturer, they'd still be pretty decent, private label an entire line from one of these big manufacturers and have 100 products out in just a few months and make more money. But I refuse to do that. We go out and absolutely every product is what I call a game changer. Every product is like top scientists, doctors, researchers saying this is the missing link. This is what people aren't getting. Sometimes it's real simple, like truly pure, clean, deep earth source iodine. Survival Shield nascent iodine, true nascent iodine X2. Because we've tested some of the stuff out there. It's not really nascent iodine. Ours is. Whether it's the oxy powder that flushes out your intestines with higher level oxygen that time releases, whether it is the liver shield, whether it's our new product, Living Defense, Harmful Organism, Parasite Cleanse, dietary supplement at InfoWarsLife.com or InfoWarsStore.com. These nutraceuticals are powerful. Lung cleanse. Silver bullet is just 30 parts per million. More than that can be toxic, according to our experts. Still consult your doctors. Topical, internal, whatever. You take silver bullet. It is the best quality we could come out with and is lower than leading competitors that are the exact same stuff from the same manufacturer. Some of our stuff is private labeled. A lot of it's originally produced, but with big manufacturers. So that's what it comes down to. We've got a whole bunch of products. We've gotten up to like 15 products in the last 3 years. We've got a few more coming online the next few months. But I plan to kind of round stuff out with about 30 products. Because I'm not going to try to come out with like 500 great products, which takes 15, 20 years to do. That's what Longevity's done. I support them. They got a great line of products. InfoWarsHealth.com if you want to find Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 and Pollen Burst, other great products as well. Just amazing. That supports the broadcast too. InfoWarsHealth.com, InfoWarsTeam.com if you want big discounts and free shipping and want to be able to sign up for auto ship. InfoWarsTeam.com, InfoWarsHealth.com, again, is the hundreds and hundreds of products from the great folks at Longevity. Be sure and get it there because you get big discounts and it supports the broadcast. But InfoWarsLife.com are our proprietary game-changing products as well. So I want to encourage everybody to take advantage of that. We still have big specials on some of the other nutraceuticals, upwards of 25% off on things like Winter Sun, high-quality organic vitamin D, and Brain Force, and others. Still have free shipping on the water filtration systems like Alexa Pure Pro and the 10% off with promo code WATER. That's InfoWarsStore.com, and a sub-area is InfoWarsLife.com, or call toll-free 888-253-3139. And one way you can still vote is with your dollars and with your support. That's why it's important to support professors like Professor Darrell Hamamoto, who's been threatened to be fired, had his pay cut, being harassed, to tell the truth. But I can tell he's more alive than ever, because that's really the sustenance of life, is telling the truth. But when you do spread the word about free speech, when you support true classical liberals, libertarianism, whatever you want to call it, when we take back the real mantle of Renaissance and enlightenment and culture away from these tyrant control freaks and their minions, we begin to turn the tide against this new dark age the system wants to bring in. Now, I'm done ranting. I apologize. I've been ranting. I'm going to go back to Professor Hamamoto here at TrineDay.com. You want to find his publications. Professor, you got cut off getting into how they technician things, how they break it down, how they stable the young people, how they run them through, how they peer pressure them, and just young people. I mean, it's like even my kids. You know, they're in school, 13, 11, and 7. Other kids learn how to be mean, and then my kids sometimes want to be mean back. I try to teach them it doesn't matter. You'll transcend this. You know, live your own life. Find the few people you like, get along with them. It's the same peer pressure cult, and they kind of keep that going into college, into the workforce, everywhere else. But I've learned if you tell children, but also young adults about this, like you're doing, this is how you're being programmed. This is how you're being socially meant to feel bad if you don't submit to this, and then you feel accepted. Tribalism, what you naturally need, cultural, by submitting to this. This is a fake culture. You need to find true culture with real people and free association that does transcend race, religion, region, you know, ethnicity, all this stuff. True free market of ideas. So I'm done ranting. Get into how the technicians operate. You've got the floor pretty much for the rest of the hour. I want you to break it down. Major whistleblower from UCdavis, head of the Asian American Studies, persecuted for years, telling the truth. I want you to get back into how they do it, but also I'd like to ask you somewhere in there, how did you begin to wake up? Was it when they put you through the Rockefeller program, or were you always somewhat awake? And then where do you see this going? Go ahead.
Well, to answer your last question first, I was, even as a young person, and by the way, they start tracking you in elementary school. There's a reason why a certain group of kids are always taking these little standardized tests, reading, mathematics, very early on. And today, the so-called STEM program identifies students in elementary school. And that's one of the reasons why Jerry Seinfeld's daughter came back with that canned response about moving back to New York, because it's a program. And a lot of these students who are trained at UCdavis and other places at the so-called Student Community Center do what's called outreach. That's a red flag word right there, outreach, to the elementary schools and to the junior high schools and high schools. So by the time they come to the university, they've already been primed and they've been pre-selected so far as the leadership track is concerned. Now, within that, there's a pincer movement between two student constituencies that are being used. And you can tell by the amount of resources that are being allocated to these areas. And you can also tell by the identification. For example, Linda Katehi, the chancellor at UCdavis, she's an engineer by training. And by the way, she holds 19 patents for antennas. And antennas are key to this whole EMF regime that's part of the mind control system. But she has declared herself as part of the gender and sexuality studies, even though she has no academic expertise in the area. So that's a big area. It's the GLBTQIA department and programs that the so-called student activists are being recruited from. And those are the people that come into my class most recently in a sexuality class that sit in the back, and you showed a video earlier, and they start questioning you aggressively. They try to sweat you. They'll wear little fright wigs, little purple wigs, and just all of a sudden spontaneously, as if they were mind controlled, which they are, and they'll start spontaneously asking you these questions. All you have to do is break them down individually, and they begin to crumble. Another technique I've known is said, yeah, come up to the stage, the front of the stage. Here's an open microphone. Tell me what you want to see in this class. And they have nothing. They have nothing. By the way, this is a technique that a lot of comedians, stand-up people like Seinfeld, will use. They'll just turn the light on the heckler, and they don't have anything. They're there. They have a program. So getting back on point, we have the GLBTQ mafia that's out there, and the other mafia is the children of illegal immigrants and supposedly underrepresented minorities on campus. At UCdavis, there is an office in the so-called Student Community Center called AB 540. That stands for California Assembly Bill 540, the so-called DREAM Act, which hasn't even passed yet. It's not close to passing, but the University of California has taken it upon itself, probably from orders from the Pentagon, the DOD, or the Wall Street, the City of London bankers, on orders from them, to establish a center to normalize their presence, not just in the university, but in society. It's not that they care about the children of illegal immigrants, and I have nothing against them personally. They're wonderful individuals, the students. I know many of them. But they're going to be used as tools in the future out of gratitude. They're going to be the people who are in CPS, the social workers, the psychotherapists, the teachers, the people who are helping to bring in this larger globalist
Sure, the
agenda.
Soviet Union always used, just, I mean, interrupt, because it's so true what you're saying, I just got to back you up. The Soviet Union, the Nazis, all totalitarians use, quote, orphans within a 10-year training program are then the shock troops.
They are the Jugend, absolutely. And you were mentioning that there's a ethnically correct interim president appointed to the University of Missouri. I call that process whereby administrators and certain faculty, blackmail assistant professors who need to show that they're quote unquote down with the students in order to get tenure, I call that flatmail, as in flat catchers. And this comes from Tom Wolfe. This is the common strategy. If you read a classic essay by Tom Wolfe called Mowing the Flat Catchers, 1970, he talks about how the so-called liberals with a small L got behind the original Black Panthers and got into this, what he calls radical chic. And that's one of the reasons why you're not hearing a lot of professionals come forward at this point. I think they're starting to, but not in large numbers, because they're still operating on the basis of what was going on through the 60s and 70s. They don't realize that this is a really serious Maoist Pol Pot type takeover, using the Jugend as a means, as a tool for the totalitarian takeover. And the Pol Pot time, I have their children, as I mentioned, of the refugees in my classes. It's difficult selling them, but if they can get them into the so-called Student Community Center, take them to these retreats, so-called. And by the way, the other red flag word is leadership. Leadership retreats. They take them into a remote location to University of California owned or leased property. They isolate them. They play these little trust games. The trainers with the master's degrees and PhD level psychotherapists are there to oversee it. They are all trained in neuro-linguistic programming, the Delphi technique, all these different mind control protocols that come out of the Stanford Research Institute, the RAND Corporation, completely weaponized behavioral science directed against 18, 19-year-old first-year students who are away from home. They're ripe for cult membership and indoctrination and induction, along with the various cults that line up by the coffee house.
And let's remember, under the 60s earlier template that sounded reasonable, don't tell your kids what to do, let them be their own, don't be their parents. They're now looking for parents, like young gang members, looking for a father figure and joining the Crips or whatever. They're now looking for mommy and daddy, and they're giving it. This is so systematic.
That's absolutely correct. And the cohort that I'm talking about, their parents typically have their heads screwed on straight. They're immigrants. They came to the United States to make a living, to live in freedom and liberty. So it's really, really difficult. And also they're family oriented. The Latinas, they come from a society and culture that's wonderful, the parent culture. So when they come to the University of California, they have to unlearn all that. So they are indoctrinated by this weaponized behavioral science.
I agree. From what I've seen, it works better on 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th generation whites, I found, are the absolute worst, and then blacks feel like they've got been wronged, which they were, but that chip is reinstated and then projected onto everybody. I mean, am I accurate in saying, from your perspective, that whites and blacks are the easiest to get into the brainwashing, or is that wrong?
That is correct, and I would add to that 4th and 5th generation Asian Americans and 4th and 5th generation Latinos and Latinas. It's a generational drift away from the vitality of the parent culture. And so that's why it's so important to start reteaching instead of doing this quote-unquote theory in the English department of history. Let's read the Nordic tales, the medieval literature, the great works of art, literature, music, so that we can get this new renaissance into gear here. And that's where we're heading. This is where we're heading, despite the little petty tyrants.
That's right. Let's talk about your main mission. I mean, because that's really this. I mean, you have a solution, and I've read it, your essays, your work. I mean, you know, because you're an insider, how to beat them. And the new renaissance is here. We give them the opportunity that there's a real renaissance, and it's about them. It's game over.
That's right. First of all, I'm getting my students to start reading. They don't have to read Dubliners or Ulysses by James Joyce, which was purposely made difficult to understand so that you create jobs for professors of literature. But even popular literature like Michael Crichton, I mean, before he was, well, let's say he died, okay, before he expired, he was really, really getting into the heart of this bioweaponization system with his novel Next and A State of Fear, where he took apart the whole fake environmental scare, and he even had a bibliography in the back of his book and an author statement. Now, this is a man who has a medical degree from Harvard Medical School, and he's a hugely popular writer. So I get to say, please, we're coming up to Thanksgiving and the winter holidays, read a novel. And even if it has to be J.K. Rowling, the Satanist, read it with a certain eye. If you want to read Tolkien, that's fine. If you're a ringer, fine. But understand the occultic and the social and cultural engineering and the Tavistock connections to these forms of mass mind control. By the way, one thing I found common to a lot of the current generation of students, and this is true not just with Americans, but I also taught a course this summer for Fulbrighters, and so these are the best and brightest of young people from all over the world. There's one common literary source that they all share, and this is something that needs to be looked into by people in the English department or comparative literature. They've all read Harry Potter, all the volumes. These were the kids that stood in line until midnight waiting for the next volume to drop. They've all read it systematically. So there's something there. This could be like the catcher in the rye of the current millennial generation. It might be one of those Mark David Chapman trigger type deals.
And by the way, everything you say is so backed up. In fact, I just want to talk about Dr. Nick Begich, whose, of course, brother was a U.S. senator, his father a congressman. He's detailed thousands of patents, but hundreds of them on DARPA and antennas. And I even read articles in the Baltimore Sun on air where DARPA said, at the local universities, we're testing systems with wavelengths to soothe the students. So when you bring that up, I don't know how much you can go into. It sounds crazy, but we're in 2015. He says, don't worry about the fluoride in the water. That's bad enough. That, yes, they are in selective areas testing, and we know it's patented for decades, literal wavelengths with frequency pollution. And then I look at the students that come out and protest us, the Maoists, they have tattoos of Mao on them, black, white, you name it. When I look at the student that was attacking the professor, they're at Yale at the Free Speech Summit, they can't walk. They're kind of falling down. They look crazy. Their eyes don't point the right directions. And I don't go off a book's cover. But when I went out to this pro-life demonstration, and literal people showed up, black, white, you name it, they all looked the same, spiritually wise. They were like, well, the white people almost had like green skin. They were all wearing black. They would stumble into me and like, but they all pulled up like in, brand new black Jaguars and stuff, talk about the activist chic. And then we went and tracked them because we got a tip. They're like at the police review boards with the UT professors literally setting up like a communist takeover and admitting it. I mean, it's just like, that's who the elite are going to put in charge, is like weirdos stumbling around saying they love Satan that can hardly walk? I mean, there's something going on. Like, is it spiritual? Is it chemicals? What are they doing to these? I mean, we know about MK Ultra and the Unabomber, you know, at Harvard or whatever it was with the CIA MK Ultra program. I mean, he was in that, folks. That's LA Times. I'm kind of ranting here. It's just, I'm noticing something that they're like zombies. Have you seen that?
Absolutely. They're EMF zombies. As I told you before, Chancellor Linda Katehi has 19 unique patents on antenna technology to her name. It's not an accident that she was put in this position, because the University of California, Davis also has a close connection, an intimate connection with the Los Alamos nuclear labs and the Lawrence Livermore. Edward Teller thought UCdavis was one of his favorite campuses. So UCdavis is, and it also has a national primate laboratory where they workshop all these different EMG and different types of EMF.
Sure, I was led into the UT facility. Well, I don't want to get arrested. I wasn't led into it. I was allowed to see a camera into it from the psychology department. Hell on earth. But you notice that none of the liberals want to stop that.
No.
I mean, notice there's no discussion about that.
No. Yeah, welcome to the monkey house. And it's interesting that you brought up Dr. Nick Begich. I was going to speak to some of the really early on discoveries or insights that Dr. Begich had, and that was his work on HAARP. What we're seeing here with students on campus, that crazed look, that Maoist commie look that you have seen in people both on tape and in person, that comes from EMF. This is HAARP. This is HAARP in action. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you think this is the HAARP project there is just for our enemies, foreign, it's really for the people, the American people, and they're hitting our young people the most. We know about the psychotropics. I was going to mention Dr. Peter Bregan's great work on psychotropic drugs. We know that a large percentage, if not most of the young men and women are on some form of very powerful hallucinogenic drugs. They should be taking nutraceuticals, vitamin supplements, and they also should be taking mandatory gym classes. That's one of my suggestions. We need to bring back PE, K through 12, through middle and high school, and also through the college and university, so people can start getting.
Well, plus they have no social skills too. I mean, are you seeing that?
That's right. They need to learn how to be true team players, not Maoist, Pol Pot type zombie players.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it's definitely HAARP. I think that's something that needs to be looked at much more closely. Last academic year, a portable, very, very powerful portable antenna showed up, and people were talking about it, then it kind of went away. But they're experimenting with it. They're putting in new lighting systems, supposedly smart lighting systems, you name it.
And by the way, that's even in USA Today, that it can be used to transmit data back and forth, but also to calm the police officers in Minnesota where they put it in first. And they just put out like, like it's like Rasmussen poll. National poll, should we arrest global warming skeptics? It's just kind of like, oh, the lights calm the police officers. I mean, we're not making this up. It sounds fantastical, but it's all really going on. I mean, I remember 6 years ago, exposing stingray systems, and they wouldn't admit they were there. Now everybody's like, oh, of course there's secret cell towers grabbing everything. I mean, it's just, I'm telling you, it is a fantastical time to be alive. As scary as it is, Professor, isn't it exciting that we are conscious and trying to figure this out? I mean, it's an adventure.
It is an adventure. I am so glad, happy, honored to be here in 2015, joining in this battle with you and the liberty-loving people in America and around the world to take back our civilization. And we are going to win, because all I have to do is talk to the gang stalkers individually, and they melt, they break down. The programming just disappears. It's not that strong.
Because you've got humanity, and it's electrical.
Exactly. They know I'm real. They know I'm sincere. They know I don't have an axe to grind or a hidden agenda. If I did, I would, be on Wall Street or something. But
look, when you tell the truth, the eloquent way you do, and expose it and give the sources, they've been looking for the truth. They're already subconsciously smart. You're not teaching them anything. You're just telling them what they already knew, but was blinded. You're just opening the curtains and the lights coming in, and that's why we are going to win, is because humanity wants to succeed together to the stars. It's going to happen. We've just got to really work hard to try to make this transition period not as destructive as these wicked elites would rather it be. I'm going to go to break, keep over 5 minutes. I know you probably got to go to finish up, talk about some of your papers, how we keep you at the university, how we get what you're teaching in associate programs, maybe to other universities. I know there are a lot of other professors around the country of every race, color, creed, religion that are also basically saying the same thing you're saying. This is explosive. It's dangerous to the elite. We'll be right back. By the way, I wasn't really told not to say this, but it's always best not to talk about really interesting contacts until you can just try to land them as a guest, but usually people don't want to come on as guests. I've talked about how basically top generals, current, former, media people, you name it, about 95% of the time they don't want to be talked about on air. But people need to know how many people are aware of what's going on and tuned into what's happening. And last night, I got a phone call by who I've got to say is one of the coolest Hollywood actors there is. And, of course, I didn't answer the phone. I was driving, and then I called back, and they were at an event, and then I talked back and forth via text. But I want to try to work on getting him on the show. I'll just say this. Give us some money, Lebowski. I mean, you just cannot beat how many great people are waking up to what's happening. And they're classical liberals, folks. And it's scaring the establishment to death. I mean, most people in the CIA don't want to destroy the country. Most people, most cops don't want to. It doesn't matter what color you are, or bureaucrats, or farm workers, or whatever. And once the cosmology of reality, because we're not telling you what to believe, we've studied the documents. Once this whole real universe breaks open and people get out of the controlled bubble, it's over. All we're doing is pulling the curtain back. And it's exponential, the awakening happening. My concern, only got 3 minutes left, final word, Professor, is that they're going to start a war with Russia. They're going to do something with China. The globalists don't want to give up, and they need some cataclysm to keep us in line. I think they're building all this mind control towards some cataclysm, which they then think will all submit under the next level. I mean, I just think we're at a critical crossroads right now.
Well, that's why it's so important to get the information and the analytical framework out ahead of this, so that when a stage cataclysm does appear, that the American people and the people of the world will not panic, and they will not submit to fear and go along with the totalitarian system that they'll try to impose on us, the police state, once they put this stage crisis into motion. So what you're doing is so vitally important as a bulwark against this.
We're all in this together.
We are.
What about these installed chips on the shoulder? Because I don't say this because you're a Japanese American, but millions or hundreds of thousands of Japanese, multi-generation, loyal people thrown in, slave labor, didn't have chips on their shoulders afterwards. Per capita, some of the most successful people out there. It's not that they weren't wrong. It's just they weren't going to let that keep them back. But it is a cautionary tale of what can happen again in this country.
Oh, it is. It's happened in our society, in our country, in our nation before. We've seen it happen in other countries as well. Don't think that it can't happen here. America, for all its bedrock values of freedom, liberty, is vulnerable as any other society, especially when you're bringing in large groups of people from societies that are used to multi-generational oppression, totalitarian dictatorships, and El Jefe systems of control. And that's part of the reason why the handlers are doing this, the AB 540 group over at the Student Affairs. So what I'm suggesting is that we take the monies that are being funneled into Student Affairs and then reallocate them into foundational courses. Hire assistant professors like Melissa Click. One of the reasons why they are doing this is because they want to get a tenured job. So the only way they can do it is to mama the administration and to giving them a job. So let's create positions for assistant professors. Let's get back into the humanities curriculum: literature, film, new media, religion, philosophy, music, studio art.
Instead, all they teach is chip on the shoulder and how to be in a group, not to be a free human.
Right. It's the mantra: race, class, gender, race, class, gender, race, class, gender. Whatever class you take, that is all you hear. Ladies and gentlemen, that's over. That's 30, 40 years out of date. Once I tell my students that that's as out of fashion as Uggs, they abandon it. They want to do something that's cool.
Well, great job. Great job. You're a true trailblazer. Professor Darrell Hamamoto, we salute you. Thank you so much. We'll be back, folks. Stay with us.